Hello, this is Matt. I'm 40 years old and I'm seeking knowledge so that I can learn how to communicate and teach my kids so I can prepare my kids to be better than me. These are the only men I want to actually lose to. I want them to have the wisdom and willingness to take a risk, the confidence and courage to win, lose, or draw, to get their money out of the bank and put it to work. Today we're talking about debasement, which is me giving you less but receiving the same amount. So back in the day, they used to decrease the size of the coins. Then they started to decrease the purity. So they reduced the amount of silver or gold. Now there's no silver, no gold. We're just dealing with paper. So how do you debase the paper? You print more. So either way, you are decreasing the value of the money and hoping that you receive the same amount of goods. But it doesn't work. If you look back through history, it always gets figured out. So the people that are receiving that debased money all of a sudden want more. And that's what we call inflation, right? So the value of the currency goes down, which means you have to spend more of that currency to buy the same amount of goods. Now, we do need the bank. The bank creates currency. We need currency to make the economy go. The more money out there, the more things inflate in price, and we need that, right? We can't have deflation because then everything gets less and less valuable that you own. You need currency supply to grow so that prices can continue to grow, but it has to be manageable, right? You can't just dilute your current dollars by printing paper. Well, us coin collectors, I think we are preserving our history and remembering our history. So let's go to the Antoninianus. This is Roman times. They tried to come out with a coin that was the size of a nickel. It was about 5 grams, and they tried to pass it off as worth 2-to-1 to a denarius. So that just didn't make sense, and the people knew it. It was a nickel-sized coin, but they were saying its value is worth 2 times a denarius. Again, it didn't make sense. Compare that to a modern day nickel. Somebody's saying that dime is worth twice as much, right? I know why the dime is small because it used to be silver, but modern day, if you give a child a nickel and a dime, how do you explain that the dime is worth 2 nickels? So it's Gresham's law, where bad money drives the good money out of circulation. Again, the good money ends up going in people's pockets, putting it into coin collections. People don't want to spend the good money that has a lot of value. They'll spend this modern day currency, they'll spend the Antoninianus, and they will drive the denarius to be hoarded. So let's talk about purity. The denarius used to have 93.5% pure silver. And then over time, it went down to 5% silver. That's ridiculous, right? It's a copper coin with a wash of silver. Worthless. So did we learn our lesson from Rome? Nope. Let's go to Britain now. So the sterling pound used to actually be a pound of sterling silver. Imagine that. A pound of silver used to be a pound. Then it was reduced to about 6 ounces. Then King Henry VIII came along and started to debase the money. And then eventually it got down to be a pound being about 1 ounce. So we went from a sterling silver pound being worth a pound of silver all the way down to about 1 ounce. It was a ridiculous amount of debasement. So what happened after King Henry passed away? Queen Elizabeth I revalued the pound to be 4 ounces of silver, but most importantly, she made the coins sterling silver again, 92.5% purity. So bringing the coinage back to 92.5% pure brought confidence back to the money, but the lesson that Gresham said was you can't introduce this 92.5% pure silver while the other coins are still out there in circulation. He talked about how this good money, if it goes out there at par with the existing junk, this existing junk is still going to circulate, and this new good stuff will never circulate because people won't spend it. It's 92.5% pure. There's no way we can make it on par with the current coins. So people are just going to hoard it and put it in their pocket, and it'll be all for naught. So what they had to do was recoin. So they had to call back all the bad coinage, pull it out of circulation. It all has to do with the value of the metal. And if we don't have to look that far back, look at 1982, the cents. So we had that 1982 where most of them are copper. Weigh them. If they're 3.1 grams, they're copper. Then in 1983, all of them were zinc. So there you go. That's good money, right? Copper cents, bad money. And with Gresham's law, it says that bad money will drive out good money. So these old copper cents were hoarded, right? Whenever you see one, you keep it. You take it out of circulation. You rescue it. This belongs in somebody's collection. It's worth almost 3 cents. It's foolish to spend it. Do you remember 1853 when the quarters and the dimes, they were reduced to 0.72 ounces of silver, while the dollar was still at 0.77? They reduced the quantity or the size of the change by 6%. So they made 4 quarters be 0.72 ounces of silver, while the silver dollar was still 0.77. So that's one way to debase your currency, is by changing the size of the coins. The next option is to reduce the purity. So if you have 90% silver and then all of a sudden you turn your half dollars to 40% silver and then you go to 0% silver, that's a debasement. What if in somebody's cash register there was $1? Now we're going back to 1921, $1 and $1. Which would you rather have? Again, this is 0.772 ounces of silver. This is 0.723 ounces of silver. So this is worth 7% less. But back then, silver was demonetized. This is the Morgan dollar that started in 1878, but the dollar was 0.7734 ounces. So if you do the math, they set the $1.29 price to silver. So $1.29 per ounce was the silver price. U.S. government set it, which made the $1 be 0.7734 ounces. And that's how the dollar was defined. Now gold was in relation to silver. So there was a ratio of a 15 to 1 or 16 to 1 to silver. That's how you define gold. But the dollar was tied to silver. Until 1873, the crime of 73, where they demonetized silver. So instead of defining the dollar as 0.7734 ounces of silver, the dollar was now defined as gold. They said a $1 gold piece, and it was 0.0483 something. I mean, it's very small. And they set the price of gold to be $20.67. So if you look at a double eagle, which was a $20 piece, it was 0.9675 ounces. So that coin had $20 stamped on it, but it wasn't a full ounce, right? It was 0.9675. So if you think about the gold price per ounce, $20.67. That's how they came up with it. It's incredible. So again, this used to be $1. But after 73, it was still $1 to spend, but the US dollar by definition was no longer tied to silver. It was now tied to gold. So at first when I heard crime of 73 demonetized silver, I thought they pulled all the silver. Not true. They still had silver, and it was just up to you. So again, if you're a coin collector back then, you were probably pulling these out of circulation and spending these. It was foolish to go spend your Morgan dollars or your peace dollars when you could just go into your drawer and grab half dollars or dimes or quarters, right? So again, bad money at the time chasing out good money. So these were the ones that people probably kept, just like we are now keeping our copper cents. Because once the value of the intrinsic metal gets above the face value, that's when this now becomes good money. And that's what happened in 1964. So again, back in 1934, This was the good money. This was the bad money. Once they pulled the silver out of the half dollars in 1964, now those were the bad money, right? The 1965 quarters that were clad, then were chasing this into people's pockets and drawers, right? So then you would not want to circulate, you would not want to spend your silver coinage, you were spending your clad. Now, when the Civil War started, specie redemption was ended again. You no longer could go back to your bank and demand gold and silver. Then Abraham Lincoln created the greenback, which just introduced more currency into the system. We needed more currency. Now, before World War I, everybody's on the gold standard, but 1914 to 1918, Europe temporarily goes off the gold standard so that they're able to print currency. So during World War I, US, we stayed on gold standard. So we became the ones that were sending product to Europe, and they were sending gold to us. So we were benefiting from World War I. We didn't enter into the war until 1917, so we really missed the first couple years, and we profited from what we sent to them. Now, during the war, the British currency devalued by 35%, the French currency by 64%, and Germany took the biggest hit, 96% devalued. So the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 made Germany responsible for all the reparations. They had to pay to rebuild Europe. So what happened from 1921 to 23? You had the Weimar, right? The hyperinflation. It was incredible. So Prohibition, he had 1920 and it ended in 1933. So think about that. Prohibition all the way to the stock market crash and the Depression. And then 1933, they said, okay, Prohibition's over. But what else happened in 1933? Do you remember FDR's executive order 6102, the gold confiscation, where he said it's illegal to own gold. Send it to us and we'll pay you $20.67 per ounce. So what are you going to do? It's either illegal, which means you're either going to have to pay up to $10,000 fine or go to jail for 10 years if you keep your hoard of gold. And it's patriotic to turn it into the government. This is going to help us get out of the Depression. What are you going to do? Most people turn their gold in for $20.67 per ounce. Then the government revalued gold to $35 an ounce. That's 69% gain that the government assumed, right? They bought it for 20, they sell it, or at least now its value is 35. So they won on that bet, right? But what are you going to do? You're a patriotic person, you're a law-abiding person, you're going to follow the rules. And we just devalued our money by 69%. So our dollar used to be able to buy gold at a rate of $20.67. Now it's going to take you $35 to buy that ounce of gold. So actually the US dollar was devalued in 33. So we originally were tied to silver, right? 1792. By 1873, no longer tied to this, we were tied to gold. From 1873 all the way to 1933. That's a long run, almost 60 years. So what were we tied to come 1934? The Federal Reserve note, the dollar bill, right? So we already ditched gold, and you know why? Also think about that $20 gold piece. The reason why they had to take them in was because they were no longer worth $20, right? If you walked into a store, you would be foolish to pay them with a $20 gold piece because the gold value's $35, right? So they basically demonetized or got rid of gold coinage as legal tender. Now we're just playing with bills. And the reason why we could still use silver was, like I said, the silver price after 73 tanked, right? The silver value was still less than the face value. So we continued to use these in transactions until 1964 is when the silver price finally got to be more valuable than the face value. And that's when we stripped out
silver from the coinage. So think about that. It is absolutely amazing to learn this stuff. 1873, boom, silver took a hit and didn't come back to be above $1.29 until 1964. That is a long 90 years of silver just lagging. Now the US government did try to save silver. They tried to subsidize it. In 1878, Bland-Allison Act, they were buying $2 million a month worth of silver. And it wasn't until 1878, the Bland-Allison Act, is when we got the Morgan dollars that everybody knows. So everybody knows of the Morgan dollar as the silver dollar. Now this, again, 90% pure, still maintaining the same 0.773 ounces. So in 1890, same thing, but they upped it even more. They agreed to buy 4.5 million ounces of silver every month. But no matter what they did, no matter how much they bought, the market kept declining. The value kept declining. In that 20 years, from 74 to 94, the market value of silver, regardless of the 78 and the 90, we tried to prop it up, but it didn't work. The value kept declining. We were essentially diluting the currency. We kept boosting it up, providing stimulus, but nothing could keep it up. So by 1893, we had a panic. There were bank runs. We were diluting our money, so gold was fleeing the country. Because think about it. If you can get silver for 32 to 1, you can go exchange it to gold because it's legal tender, right? It is a ratio. You can trade it for gold. So everybody was converting to gold. Gold was fleeing the country. We were losing our high standard, right? So silver, in a way, was diluting, just like today the paper dollars are diluting. So Grover Cleveland in 1893 repealed that Sherman Act of 1890. So again, we were going to buy 4.5 million ounces a month. He had to repeal it. There was too much silver. In 1896, there was a politician named William Jennings Bryan that ran on the ticket of 16 to 1. And even though the market price of silver was 32 to 1, they wanted 16 to 1 because silver was the money of the farmer and the industrial worker. It was the money of the little guy, right? Trying to battle the gold, business, industrial giants, right? So William Jennings Bryan in 1896 ran for president. And it relates to the Wizard of Oz. That's the story. You have Dorothy with her silver shoes that make it easy to walk on the gold path. She picked up the Scarecrow, which was the farmer, the Tin Man, which was the industrial worker. They had the Lion, who was William Jennings Bryan. That was supposed to be the courageous leader that was going to go to Oz and talk to the president, or at least the elected officials in the great land of Oz, and try to convince them that a bimetallic system is better. Silver and gold. Bimetallic, it would work, guys. It could work. But it didn't work. He lost the election in 1896, so in 1900, the U.S. went on a gold standard, just like the rest of the world, except for China and Mexico, who are on a silver standard. And in the U.S., we were fortunate enough that you could still take a $20 bill, go to a bank and exchange it for a $20 gold double eagle. We stayed on the gold standard. So we roared through the 20s, then boom, stock market crash in 1929 led to the Depression. So now we're talking about 1929, 1930, housing prices are going down, unemployment's going up. We're actually in a deflation. There is too much restriction on the currency, so people said we need to create more currency. We need to inflate the money, put more money in the system so that the prices will start to resume. Because if you're in a deflation, nobody wants to spend their money, right? Because if you hold your $10 bill, and if you're in a deflation zone, this $10 bill is going to buy you more if you hold it. But if you're in an inflation time, every day that goes by, this $10 bill becomes worth less and less. So there's the danger of a deflation, right? If it's a deflation, everybody holds their money.
So in 1931, Britain came off the gold standard. After they came off, then Canada came off, Sweden, the Netherlands, Portugal, Egypt. Everybody came off the gold standard. Nobody wanted to be the last one on the gold standard. So now we get into 1932. Herbert Hoover's the president. FDR's running against him. So FDR wins the presidency, and in March of 1932, first day on the job, bank holiday, closes the bank for 4 days because there were bank runs, right? So people were nervous. They were nervous that the banks were going to go out of business, so they went to the bank, they got their bills out. Again, we're still in a deflationary time, so you want that physical money. FDR was able to restore confidence, so people actually returned the money to the bank. Crisis averted, right? So again, March 1932. Let's fast forward to April 1933. This is when the gold confiscation came. This is when FDR said, send us your gold, we'll pay you $20.67. Now this was a plot to get gold, but also the idea was they needed to revalue. They needed to devalue the US dollar to match what was going on in Europe. So again, everybody else except for the US and France had already come off gold. So before the confiscation, gold was set at $20.67. After the confiscation, the dollar was devalued so that it now cost you $35 to buy 1 ounce of gold. 1934, this is extremely interesting. There was a man named Pittman who was the author of the Pittman Act from 1918. Now in 1934, so he was a Nevada politician. So I'm sure he had some financial interest in boosting and subsidizing the silver industry. He said, 1934, let's start buying silver. And they were buying hordes of it. They were basically trying to manipulate the price. The market value was 35 cents per ounce. So silver was 35 cents per ounce market value. They wanted to get it up to $1.29. So they were paying too much, buying everything they could, inflating and trying to manipulate the price of silver to help subsidize all the silver miners. Now at this time, the whole world was on the gold standard, but China and Mexico were on a silver standard. So what did this do for them? All of a sudden, their money started becoming more valuable. So they were on a silver standard, silver prices were going up, it was causing their whole economy to be turned upside down. So think about that. Now the money, intrinsic value of somebody in China is worth much more than the value of the money. So now you have hyperinflation. Hyperinflation destroyed the Chinese economy. So now we're talking mid-30s. That leads to Mao. So they had inflation, economy crumble, and led to Mao. So US is off the gold standard. Next, France. So in 1935, France comes off the gold standard. Now nobody's on the gold standard. So what are we playing with now? We're paying paper bills, right? So now nobody's on gold standard. World War II comes along, then Bretton Woods in 1944. International Monetary Fund says the US dollar is now the reserve currency. It's redeemable to international partners. So if I'm in France, I can say, here is my $35. I want an ounce of gold. And this worked, right? Until 1971. That's when Nixon closed that gold window because people were actually coming to redeem that $35 gold. It was going to be a run on our gold supply. So in 1971, Nixon pulled us off the gold standard, and then gold was revalued to $42.22, right? Not a big jump, but still a revaluation. So gold right now is $42.22 according to the government. So what's the point of learning all this history about World War I to World War II? It just proves that if you hold your gold and you hold your silver, you control your destiny. If you're playing with paper money, the money can always be revalued. You are putting your faith, your fiat, into the government, right? And things happen, wars happen. And during World War I, everybody's currency was devalued. Germany's was destroyed. But even the US, we were one of the last ones that held on to that gold standard, but still in an instant, 1933, boom, gold confiscation, revalued gold to 35, which meant that your dollar would you buy you less. You didn't decide to devalue your dollar, it just happened. It was for the betterment of the country. We had to devalue because everybody else was devaluing. You don't want to have the strongest currency because then nobody buys anything from you, right? If things are so expensive in your country, nobody's going to be coming to buy your goods. And in the modern era, now that paper is not backed by specie, it's not backed by gold or silver, they now just inflate by printing more paper. It's the same process. Again, reducing the metal content or increasing the supply of paper has the same effect. You're introducing more currency that's going to drive the prices up because the value of the currency is less. And merchants are smart, right? They're going to know, hey, something's different, right? There's less silver, or nowadays, you know what? There's more paper. Everything's inflating, so I need to inflate too.